appreciate all of you hanging out with us as we roll through the Thursday edition of the program. And I want to start with this idea. So the Big Ten, if you listen to this program, you know how hard I have fought for Big Ten football to happen, for Pac-12 football to happen, for the Mountain West, for the MAC, for all four of the major conferences that shut down. I have put basically a ton of effort using all of my platforms at Outkick, all of my audience, so much behind the scenes activity, including working a great deal with the White House, with commissioners, with schools. I mean, you name it. So it was incredibly gratifying for me when the Big Ten decided to play reversed course after shutting down the season in August. Here's the problem that the Big Ten had. They waited too long to come back, and then they created no buffer, no safety net, no possibility that things might not go flawlessly. And as a result, that left them with a really bad situation compared to the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12. And in particular, if you are a Big Ten football fan, what it left you with was the possibility that if anything went wrong, the season might completely fall apart when it came to positive tests. And right now, we're dealing with that fallout in the cancellation of the Wisconsin at Nebraska football game because of 6 reported positive cases among football players and because of 6 positive cases among football coaches. Wisconsin has now shut down football activities for a full week. And so this raises all sorts of intriguing questions, not the least of which, will anybody in the Big Ten be able to complete a full season? And if not, how in the world does the College Football Playoff Committee consider things? But also raises a larger issue of what in the world was the Big Ten thinking when they know that there's going to be positive tests. You needed to have a bye week. You needed to have an extra week at the end of the season, like the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 have done, in order to deal with the fact that it's likely that things will not go perfect. Even if you look at Major League Baseball with the Marlins and with the St. Louis Cardinals, all of these situations suggest that there will be positive tests, and you need to have the flexibility to be able to postpone as opposed to cancel games. But you don't have that flexibility right now in the Big Ten. And as a result, not only is the team that tests positive going to have major issues, but so is the team that is scheduled to play a game. So if I'm an Ohio State Buckeye fan right now, for instance, I'm more afraid of my games getting canceled than I am almost of losing to anybody in the Big Ten. And if the games get canceled, how in the world can Ohio State possibly play for a championship if they only play 5 games, let's say? And you've got ACC teams playing 11, and you got SEC teams playing 11, and you've got Big 12 teams playing 11. And that doesn't even consider, by the way, the Pac-12, which hasn't even started yet and is even farther behind the 8 ball because they're not going to play any football games until they actually get to November, until we actually get to next week. So this is, I believe, a major, major issue for the Big Ten, which is a function of failed leadership. And I feel bad for Big Ten players, coaches, fans, and administrators who worked hard to try to make this happen, as well as all the parents out there who were willing to file lawsuits to make this happen. In fact, Nebraska was one of the most aggressive, if not the most aggressive school in all of college football trying to find a way to play this season. And now they finally get to play. They get beaten by Ohio State. They're about to host a big game against Wisconsin, and then the rug gets pulled out from underneath them for no problem of their own, and they're not allowed to play a game. Now, I don't know if this is possible, but if I were the Big Ten right now, I would allow Nebraska on extremely short notice to see if there's any football team they could add to their schedule this weekend to allow them to play a game to make up for the fact that they're not going to be playing Wisconsin, an out-of-conference game, obviously. I don't know if there's a team that you could schedule on this short of notice, but I feel like that would at least be some small measure of balancing act. Maybe there is a team out there that would be interested in coming and playing against Nebraska to allow the Big Red to continue to have a game. The problem is here, I think the big issue is Wisconsin, because of the 21-day quarantine required in the Big Ten, Wisconsin's entire season is in jeopardy now, because it's possible that they're not going to be able to play next week or the week after. When you only play 7 games, it's possible now that Wisconsin might only play 4 or 5 games in the regular season, and that's assuming this thing is not going to spread even more substantially. That's a big deal. The 21-day quarantine makes zero sense. There's absolutely no justification for it from anywhere. It's 10 days in the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC if a player tests positive. And even that is probably aggressive, considering that none of these college kids are having substantial health-related issues. Now, the Big Ten, I believe, was trying to virtue signal, and they were trying to make social justice warriors happy. And when they did that, I think they have failed and fallen flat on their face, particularly because there was also a report that came out last night that, remember when everybody was all fired up about myocarditis and how dangerous it was going to be, and oh my God, you could never play college football? All of the studies now reflect that there are no major issues with myocarditis. So basically, everything that the Corona Bros in sports media told you about why college football couldn't play or why the NFL couldn't play, there's no record of the virus spreading during the course of games. All of them have gotten it completely wrong in this respect. So I feel bad for Big Ten players, coaches, fans, and parents, and everybody out there who fought so hard for a season, because the Big Ten waited so long to come back and created a season without any bye week or any ability to make up games, such that they're going to fail, at least in a big way, compared to the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12, who handled this perfectly, expected that they would have major issues, started play in September, and knock on wood, so far it looks like things are going to go pretty flawlessly. Look, I mean, I know that everybody lost their mind when the LSU, Florida, and Vanderbilt, Missouri games had to get rescheduled. But right now, I should knock on wood, so I'm knocking on wood in my home office here. Right now, we are looking at the SEC being able to play 36 out of the 38 games that have been scheduled in the first 6 weeks of the season. They are close to having a nearly flawless debut. 36 out of 38 is incredible. They're now moving into the time of year where there are a bunch of bye weeks, so they have some flexibility there. But right now, they only have 2 games rescheduled for the end of the season. Now, I'm not saying everything's going to go perfect in the SEC, the Big 12, or the ACC, but if you were setting odds right now, the odds are very high that those teams are going to be able to find a way to finish their season and that they're going to be able to crown real champions. I don't know that you can say the same about the Big Ten, particularly when you consider that Wisconsin was scheduled and is still scheduled to be the best team in the Big Ten West. So whoever wins the Big Ten West is going to be playing against probably Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. If Wisconsin is there at 4-0 or 5-0 or whatever the heck it is, how much of a delegitimized Big Ten title game are we talking about? Moreover, what if you end up in a situation where there's a conflict in a big way because of the lack of games that are played due to these games having to be canceled, not postponed? Again, big difference to me between having a game canceled and having a game postponed. And so I'm not optimistic that things are going to go well with Wisconsin or with any other situation in the Big Ten. In fact, when I talked with all of you guys about this, we had Joel Klatt on the program earlier this week, what did I say? And what did he say? It's not a question of whether there will be any games canceled. It's how many, and we're already there in week 2 of the Big Ten. It's just a failure of leadership of the chancellors and the presidents and the commissioner that they have set up the Big Ten to fail by coming back with a 21-day quarantine in the event any players test positive, and also starting so late that the only option anytime a player tests positive is to pretty much cancel. Let me bring in the crew. Danny G, does this seem fair to you or the players or the coaches that are involved in the Big Ten?
No, I mean, it's interesting that the conference that thought they cared the most and some of the presidents and ADs who reportedly were dragging their feet. And by the way, did we ever find out the real story about the quote-unquote vote that happened back in the day?
I think it was 11-3 that they voted to cancel the season, but then eventually they voted 14-0 to bring it back. But this is they waited too long.
Yeah, they wound up creating a bigger problem.
I know. I mean, I talked with, like I said, so many people in this conference, and there was the hope that they could get back in early October and have the ability to build in some weeks to reschedule in the event that things go wrong. And look, I'm not claiming to know how the season is going to end in the Big 12, the SEC, or the ACC, but I think you would be hard-pressed at this point to argue that things haven't gone really well in the Big 12, the ACC, and the SEC in terms of how many games you've been able to play relative to how many games were scheduled. The leadership of those conferences and the presidents and chancellors involved in the decision-making there have done a vastly better job than the Big Ten has, and I think that's unfortunate for the conference as a whole. Dub, the Big Ten tried to turn itself into the gold standard. Instead, they've turned themselves into the cubic zirconium standard by completely failing and appearing in many ways to be artificially social justice warrioring here with all the virtue signaling they did, which ultimately is going to harm the players and the coaches in this conference.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is something that was, fairly predictable when you look across the entire landscape of college football. We've seen all the issues that teams like Houston and Baylor have had. You mentioned LSU and Florida have a postponement. They're all over the country. So the chances of the Big Ten going through an entire season with not one issue was essentially 0%. So this is something that was predictable. It's something that you in this show predicted would more than likely happen during the season weeks ago. So it's going to be intriguing to see what happens moving forward, how many of these games are actually just going to get straight up canceled. And the team that's going to really hurt, like you mentioned, is teams like Nebraska, whose roster is ready to go. They don't have any issues this week, but they're not able to play, and their game is just getting canceled. They can't even make it up. So I think your idea about them finding another opponent this week is a good one, but I just don't even think it's possible. It's what?
On this short of notice,
yeah, they have Thursday. One day basically to find an opponent. I don't think that's possible. So
I have no idea. What teams might be eligible to play or able to play that would need a game and would like to be able to play against Nebraska. I again don't know the answer to that question, but maybe there's a possibility. Anyway, I would allow a school to explore that possibility at least if I were the Big Ten. What about you, Eddie? Is this not imminently foreseeable? Just another example of the Big Ten's failure?
Yeah, I if you said this, I apologize for repeating it, but I believe the CDC guideline is 10 days. I don't know, where did they come up with 21 days?
It makes no sense.
Why did they double it? I mean, and add another day? And I mean, I assume that everyone in the Big Ten was just happy to be back, and I guess they said, yeah, whatever you say, we'll agree to it. But it didn't. I mean, at the time, it was like, why are we having 21 days? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, and I believe somebody looked this up. I believe coaches is 10 days. So it makes no sense. Like, why would the standard not be the same for a coach in the Big Ten as for a player? And again, the people, by and large, testing positive across the board would have no idea they had this virus unless they were getting tested on a regular basis. So it's not as if we're dealing with a major health condition here. And I think the Big Ten just decided, again, I think it was pure virtue signaling, we're going to basically double the recommendations in the ACC and the SEC and the Big 12 so that we look like we care more than anybody else. And the reality is it's totally without logic or basis in any kind of factual understanding. It's absolute insanity. What about you, Roberto? You sobered up yet?
Yeah, but I'm like kind of tired today.
Yeah.
More tired than yesterday.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, then I checked the beers when I got home and I actually drank like 12. So
Yeah.
yeah.
12. Did you have to take an Uber home from the show too after celebrating the Dodger win?
Yeah, and I actually drove into work today. It felt kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was odd.
So is this just all a disaster by the Big Ten?
Yeah, if they really cared so much, they should have stuck to their guns and not played football at all. They like you say, they're just like virtue signaling right now. That's all that is.